Hey everybody, it's Wednesday morning and I usually do a craft demo today and running a little late. I usually like to be up on Facebook by 11, but yeah, I've had a morning. So I am going to do, I'm sitting in a different spot than usual. You can see the stencil wall behind me. If you're not familiar with the studio, that's where all the stencils are, and if you come in you can use those to use in your artwork. But I am going to work today with my jelly printing, and I had some stuff left over on the table from the bookbinding I did the other day, and so I thought maybe I'd just do a little taster demo of some bookbinding, just a quick bookbinding technique. It's not the full bookbinding that takes hours, but I'm going to show you just a little piece that you can use for all sorts of projects, not just bookbinding. So we're going to go ahead and switch it around. So the beginning of the store. So I'm just at my table. And the first thing you have to do is choose your jelly prints, which I have a few to choose from. I've got the piece that I like to use. I like to use, when I do my bookbinding, 8.5 by 14 inch, so legal size paper. So I've already cut a piece that's slightly bigger than a legal size piece of paper, folded in half. So when you do bookbinding, you start with sheets of paper, you fold them in half to create leaves and then pages. So each sheet of paper creates 2 leaves, which creates 2 pages each. So that's 4 pages in one sheet of paper. Anyway, so I've cut my cover, quote, my cover piece, to be slightly larger than my page, so that I have a little lip, both to open the book with and also to protect the pages. So basically I'm going to look for a piece of jelly printing that maybe is one of my bigger ones, and I have a lot of jelly printing that is my 5 by 7 size because I really like that size. This is my jelly printing journal that I'm going to work in tomorrow, which is where I take and I do stuff with the jelly prints that I've been creating. So let's see, I like that one. That one's cool. That one's cool. That one needs layering up on. You can see I have lots of jelly prints. It's one of my favorite ways to, to sort of recenter creatively sometimes. Partly because it's so organic, you can't really control the outcome. I mean, you can, it just takes a lot of forethought, which I don't always have. So, you go through and that one sort of is like on the cusp of what I think of as finished. No. These are all ones that I'll come back in and print over. If you like jelly printing, Fodder Club this week is going to have a little bit of jelly printing in it. I kind of like that one. So, you can come join us, see what we're doing. Fodder Club, we just play. We end up creating things that we use later on in collages, mixed media collages, potentially. And so if that sounds fun to you, one of the things we're going to do is plan an actual collage day. Oops, got some empty paper that I should pull out. There's one of my resists. That one's a cool one. I could spend the whole session just going through looking for jelly prints, to be honest. Let me just dig down a little bit and see if there aren't some. So here are some that I did. I actually did this for an art project. And I'm taking art classes, so like that one's kind of fun. A little moody. And that one's kind of fun. All right, getting close on this. Love that one. I'm not even halfway through the bucket. Oh my gosh, guys, I've gone crazy with my jelly prints. I gotta do more jelly printing, collaging, obviously. And some of these aren't jelly printed. That's mixed media, meaning I've used nice stencils and things on top of it. Okay, so I have a few here. Whew, that's heavy. Hey, Lois. I'm here working with my jelly prints, so hopefully you get some ideas of things you can do. with them. Ones that I like. I'm just thinking about what might be fun, you know, for a cover. And then I'm going to be ending up cutting another one. So this is going to be a 2 jelly print project. So let me think. Do you like that? I think maybe I'll just go with this idea. My friend Chantel says first thought, best thought. So we're just going to go with that. And I'm going to use wax paper here because we're going to end up with a gluey mess, and we're going to be, you know, working quickly enough that we don't want to have to clean. And with a piece of wax paper, you can just and take it off or get rid of it. So this is not Davy board. If you were doing a real book, and if you come to my bookbinding class, you will get a piece of book board which looks like this but is acid free. This is just a little pulpier. Let's see if I have a, yeah, here's an example of actual Davy board. I don't know if you can see that it's not, it's a little more fine. And this, at least I think that's what that is. It also has no acid. It's acid free. And so same with the glue I'm going to use is a pH neutral PVA. So, you know, you can kind of use any glue that you want if you like it, but know that when you're bookbinding, you want glue that has a neutral pH. And that's so that it doesn't dissolve your pages, because acid, you know, we've all seen the Alien movies, acid eats through things, so you don't want to do that. And so I do sell the PVA, I do sell the book board in big sheets. You have to cut it down. But this was just a piece of scrap paper I had around, so if you're not so worried about it, you can use your good old glue stick and you know, the back of a watercolor pad, or you know, even a cereal box if you don't mind it being super thin. And so I'm going to use a craft glue brush. I sell these as well. They're pretty cheap, but they're sturdy. You can soak them, clean them, use them again. It's worth noting that a sponge will work really well too, mostly because it'll absorb some of the glue, and when you actually put it down, it'll sort of retain some of the glue, and you can kind of control how much glue goes down at once versus with a brush. And I'm going to be using a bone folder. I also need a pair of scissors, which hopefully I'll be able to reach and get without having to get up. Yep, right here, always have scissors. Okay, so a bone folder is made of bone, and there's a reason for that. It's got a nice stiff, it's nice and hard, and you can sand it if it gets too dirty or nicked or anything like that. This has got some sort of gunk on it, which I need to sand off. But they do make ones that are not bone if that is not something you want. And that work okay, not great, not as well I don't think, because whenever you make something out of plastic, there's always a little give and they get nicks and things. But so does this. So that's personal preference, really. And then you can use almost anything for a cover. I can tell you, having used scrapbook paper, that it breaks, it splits around the edges, and even the high quality stuff really isn't meant to get wet, and so it buckles in different ways. Ideally, you'll use some sort of rice paper. Here's the paper that I use in my bookbinding class. You can see it's a heavy-duty handmade paper, and it's unidirectional, so that when it absorbs water, it doesn't absorb it in just one direction and bend in one direction. It kind of does it all in every direction, and that's part of what you want. I'm going to be using just my usual Bristol paper that I like to jelly print on, so it's going to react a little differently. It's going to be a little cheaper in that way, but you know, I'm just doing a craft version today, so I'm not so worried about it. And as long as I wrap it up and press it really quickly before it all dries and warps, then should work fine, especially for what I'm doing. I'm just doing a craft book with this. I'm not trying to make something I want to pass down to my children. It could if it got treated well. So I'm just going to splodge on a bunch of glue. This glue is a little compromised, but you want enough that it will cover the book board in an even layer. You don't want puddles. You don't want it to be soaking, but you do want enough coverage so that as you lay it out, as you spread it out, that it doesn't dry on you before, you know, if this end doesn't dry on you by the time you get to that end, which you may think, oh, come on, it's not going to dry that fast. But it does. Now I don't have to worry. This is going to get completely covered by cover paper, I don't have to worry so much, about getting glue on the edges and stuff like that. When I do the inside cover, we do need to worry about that, and I'll show you why. I need more glue. It's better to have not enough glue and have to add than to have too much glue. Oh, thank you, Kendall. I forgot to tell you that I had started. I gotta up my communication skills. Hopefully y'all know Kendall's the ghost behind the machine at this point. She's the one putting up the posts, the items as I mention them. The glue, I think, is Lineco, if you're wondering where it is. I don't know if you put that up already. I do have the glue in there. So, okay. So as you can see, it doesn't have to be perfect, but I don't want big puddles. So I'm just gonna spread it out so I don't have big puddles. And then I'm gonna do two things. One is I'm gonna pick this up, and then because I'm paranoid about it, I'm gonna fold that over so that I don't have a gluey mess to put my work down into, which happens all the time. And I'm gonna flip it over, and I'm just gonna try to eyeball it into the center. If you're really someone who likes precision, you might have gone in and drawn in some guidelines as to exactly where you want it. You can do that too. But I am an eyeballer, too lazy for stuff like that. So, and now I'm just going to use the flat long end of my bone folder like a squeegee, and I'm going to go around and I'm going to just get out any wrinkles and or bubbles. And it's going to squeeze the glue out the edge, which is kind of what I want. That means that any extra glue has been edged out. And you can see I've got a nice flat surface, but you can also see, I don't know, I'm hoping you can see that it is going to warp the board a little bit. And that's normal. That's why we press it at the end. Now, the next part is for me to fold over the edges on all sides. If we were professional bookbinders, we would go in and we'd trim this all to the same size so that even underneath the cover piece on the inside, you'll be able to see that all the edges are even. I do not bother with that. I'm going to trim my corners away though, because if I don't, I'll end up with a sort of unsightly bulk here at the corner. And I want to make sure that I don't trim it all the way against that corner, because if I do that, I won't actually cover the corner when I wrap it. So I'm going to leave a little bit of a gap between the point and the edge of my cut. Now, if this was obnoxiously long compared to the sides, I would trim it, but I'm not going to now. Okay, so I'm actually going to start with some clean, and I'm going to be a little methodical about this. I actually get pretty careful at this point because you don't want to end up with glue everywhere. I'm going to do the two sides. I'm going to spread my glue. I'm going to really make sure it gets against that edge of that book board, because we really want the cover to adhere. I'm going to move it away from the glue, and I'm going to cover that gluey mess up, and then I'm going to wrap, and I'm really going to try to get that paper in contact with the board. And I'm going to come along and I'm going to rub it down with my bone folder, and I'm going to make sure if I get glue on my bone folder that I clean it off. This paper is a little stiff, so it's inclined to create a little bubble on the edge there. And then on these edge bits here, you want to add a little glue, and then you want to present wrap. So you want to tuck it in and rub it down so that this little edge slightly angles away, so that when this comes in, it's on the inside of the edge of my board. That's important. So I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. I'm going to add just a teensy bit of glue. Get it in there with my brush, and then I'm going to present wrap. For exactly the same reason that you wrap your corners, be careful of your corners on a present. And now I'm going to come in and do the next one on the other side. And I've got some glue there, so I'm not using my wax paper as efficiently as I want, but that's okay. It happens. Okay, so again, cover up your gluey mess so you don't ruin your project. Not that you would ruin it, you just have to go in and glue something else over top. You know me, I don't ever think of anything as really ruined, just not finished. Okay, so I'm going to come in, rub that down, present wrap my corners with a little bit of glue. Okay. Now these jelly prints, you know, when you do a jelly print, you're working with paint. So the acrylics, usually acrylics, and so they're all water soluble, so they should manage, they should withstand this process really well. Thanks, Lois. Okay. Fold over my gluey mess and then fold over that top, really working to get those corners flat. Now, if you end up with a little bit of an unsightly poke out there on your corner like I did there, there's a professional way to deal with that, and it's called whacking. So, all joking aside, that is what you do, and there are also little caps that you can put on corners, and sometimes you cover it with a little bit of leather or a little bit of parchment. There's all sorts of ways to deal with corners to make them more sturdy and to cover up imperfections. If I had cut this too close and ended up not quite covering that corner, I could always take a little bit of my corner that I had taken off and glue that down there before I do my wrapping as well. Anyway, my goal this week is just to really show you guys what to do with some of the jelly printing, because we all end up, when you jelly print, it is so prolific, unless you're one of those people who really works on one jelly print at a time. It's not hard to end up with a bunch of jelly prints and then think, now what? Now, of course, if you're just honoring the process and getting what you need out of the process and the end result doesn't really matter to you, then go ahead and use them as a fire starter, or, you know, give them away or ritually bury them in the backyard. I'm all for it, but here, hopefully you're getting inspired by this, and you know, I'm pretty stoked with how that turned out. That came out really nice. But I'm only halfway done, and you can see that it is warping, and because this is not bookboard, it's kind of warping everywhere. It's warping in both directions, which is unusual. With bookboard, there's a grain, and so it usually warps with that grain, and usually you're trying to get it to warp in a certain direction because it's easier to deal with one direction over another. So now I'm just thinking about, like, what's a good jelly print for interior. Now, the interior, I want to cut a piece that's just shy of the actual size, and so this is 8 3/4 by 7 1/4. I had to think about it. So I'm going to cut a piece that's literally the size of my page, which is going to be 7 by 8 1/2. So I'm going to go, so first I'm just going to trim off the edge, because I want this to be jelly print from edge to edge. So I'm just going to trim it so that I have that edge to work with. And then she thinks to herself, okay, I'm going to trim it down to 7 and 8 1/2. And of course, this is, you know, that's dimensions that fit my pages. If you have your own pages, you're going to cut a bookboard piece that is just a little bit bigger than that. I usually add 1/4 inch all the way around. There we go. So I'm not going right now for something that coordinates particularly. I'm just going to, I'm just looking, for a nicely filled out jelly print to put on there. So if I were maybe thinking really far ahead, I might have jelly printed a bunch of stuff with the same color, the same color combination, so that I could then create something like this with the front and the back and the inside and all that kind of all have the same look. All right, so now this is my interior piece, and the edges are going to be raw. So I want to be extra careful that I don't get paint everywhere. So I'm going to put a bunch of paint on the page. I want the cover that it's going to go on nearby. I don't want to have to struggle to look for it or have to dig it out from under a pile of stuff. So have it ready to go near you. And then I'm going to start by painting the glue on the inside. Oh, I went ahead and ignored my own advice, even as I was giving it. Try not to get paint off the edge until the very, very end. And there's a reason for that, because once you start doing the edge bits, like I am now, if your piece moves, shifts under your fingers, which happens really easily, you don't want it to shift into that gluey mess that you just made. And you are going to get glue on your fingers. There's really just no way to avoid it, except the pain. Okay. Once you have it all spread out, you're going to pick it up, and you're going to pick it up and hold it kitty corner to each other so that you have a little bit of control as to where it's going when you put it down. Okay. Cover your gluey mess. Actually set it aside. And now you can take your bone folder. I didn't quite get that perfectly centered, but I'm going to tell you, once you do something like this and you take it home, you show it to the person you want to show it to, they're not going to be like, that's not centered. They're going to be like, you made a book? Now, I did end up with a little corner here that is not completely gluey, and this is why I love having these little triangles around, because I can just pick up a little glue with that triangle, and if it was a little bubble on the edge, I could have done the same thing where I take the edge of my triangle and poke a little glue in there so that it will glue down. So that is basically part one for my bookbinding class. When you come for my bookbinding class, you are given much more high quality materials. But again, if you are just creating something for craft, then it doesn't really matter. This is damp. It's damp now on both sides. So I will wrap it in wax paper and press it. And then I'm actually going to create a spine piece, a separate spine piece, because I have this bookbinding technique that I just learned that I really want to try. And if it turns out well, I will create a class around it. But I'm actually loving this jelly print for this particular piece. I don't know if you can see the gold on it and just how nicely it works as a cover. And I know the inside doesn't match, but I love how this turned out. All right, well, hopefully you were inspired to one, at how easy bookbinding is, and if you're still not quite sure, then I invite you to come on in and take the bookbinding class. It's a lot of fun, and hopefully if you have a bunch of jelly prints around, it gives you an idea of what to do with those. One thing you can think of doing is that once you've created the front piece, rather than creating an interior piece, you can instead create an accordion fold and then glue the first page of your accordion in here. And then if you do the same thing on the back, you would have an accordion book. So bookbinding is a lot easier than most people think, and it's one of my passions. I love doing it, and I can't tell you how fun it is for me to combine my passion for jelly printing with my bookbinding here in one piece. So anyway, I hope that worked for you guys, and I hope to see you here this week. I've got some great boxes to open for you on Friday, and tomorrow I'll be collaging with my jelly prints again. I hope you think that's interesting, and yeah, just come on in. I'm here. All right. Thanks, everyone. Bye.